Howdy. Before I discuss the psychological disorder that I have chosen, I would first like to discuss the medical model from my perspective. I believe that the medical model is the idea that a psychological illness comes as a result of a physical cause, and because there is a physical cause, a cure can be found. If we look at this from a non-psychological perspective, such as the idea of breaking bones, we can see that there is an illness, which is the broken bone, a physical cause, which is what broke the bone, and a cure, which is resetting the bone into an ideal position. It is important to note that I stated that there is an ideal position as the cure. The psychological disorder that I will be discussing today are depressive disorders, specifically those caused by the neurotransmitter serotonin. As we know from class, serotonin is the neurotransmitter responsible for the general feeling of well-being and happiness. An interesting statistic that I found is that 2.4% of Americans in 1990 took SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and 13.2% of Americans take them today. This got me thinking about what we spoke about in class in Chapter 1 and Wundt, specifically that of structuralism, and I somewhat believe that the reason that more Americans are taking SSRIs is because that they are examining and measuring their inner thoughts and mental activities. Depressive disorders have two major categories of causes, the first of which I like to refer to as obvious causes, because they are easily uncoverable by a healthcare professional, such as a psychiatrist or a therapist. An example of these would be teratogens. These are environmental factors that influence the cognitive development of a baby while it is in the womb, such as alcohol or nicotine. And it makes sense to think that if a mother consumes nicotine or alcohol while a baby is in the womb, then it would have some sort of negative influence on the reuptake of serotonin or the production of serotonin within the brain, which would cause feelings of unhappiness, feelings of well-being in the child as they develop further in their life. The second form of causes of depressive disorders, I'm really going to tie this into Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Specifically the two phases of concrete operational and formal operational. Piaget refers to children as little scientists, little adults, so they are constantly taking in ideas, new schemas, new things like that. And if they view a loved one, such as a parent or a friend, being sad or angry all of the time, this would have a negative impact on the production of serotonin in the brain, and possibly cause a negative impact on the reuptake of serotonin in the brain. The medical model is beneficial in a situation like this because it allows healthcare professionals to have a somewhat linear path to determining the cure for the patient. In this situation, the psychological illness discussed was the depressive disorder of lack of serotonin, and the cure was administration of a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which allows the brain to have access to more serotonin for longer times, which ultimately results in the patient feeling happier and having a better sense of well-being. The problem with the medical model in this scenario is that the patient is conforming to an ideal standard like we discussed earlier. And this is a problem because the ideal standard in this scenario is that everybody is happy, and the truth is, oftentimes, everybody is not always happy. This will allow me to deep dive into the idea of consciousness and how it relates to us being happy. In reference to consciousness, we need to understand that we all have a different perspective of what happiness actually is, and that one person's definition of happiness does not necessarily equate to the next person's definition of happiness. In addition to this, I wanted to touch on the idea of mind-body dualism, and that you can take SSRIs to potentially cause feelings of happiness and well-being due to more serotonin being accessed in the brain, but you physically are not necessarily in a happier place. And I wanted to tie back to the statistic that I spoke about earlier, the drastic increase of individuals taking SSRIs in America. Now, while that is true, the suicide rate in America has also increased. So it is important to note that though we have found the physical cause of depression and lack of serotonin, that this might not necessarily be an objective cure for the illness.